ジャパンクール
Hey everyone, it's Foxx from modelmakingguru.com here, and welcome to the first of many review videos I'm going to be doing for you. We're going to review kits, equipment, tools, airbrushes, all kinds of things, anything basically I can get my hands on to review for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Mr. Hobby or GSI Creos Procon Boy LWA Trigger Type Double Action 0.5mm nozzle airbrush. That's a big mouthful. If you're familiar with the Mr. Hobby brand, you'll know they do a huge range of paints and accessories and all other goodly things that you model makers might like to try out. Only recently have their airbrushes and airbrush kit become available in the UK. My good friends at japancool.co.uk have sent me this one to have a play with and see what I think. There are several different airbrushes in the range, but for the purposes of this review, I'm going to be reviewing the 0.5mm airbrush. However, we'll cover off the other ones as well, and you'll be able to make a decision as to which one might be best for you. So, let's get this box open and see what we get. Okay, the first thing you'll get when you open the box is two separate instruction and information sheets. Quite unusual for airbrushes. A lot of the time when you buy an airbrush, even some quite expensive ones, you'll get kind of not much at all in the way of documentation and information. You'll get maybe a sheet that says, hey, you're on your own, go figure it out. And that's it a lot of times. And if you're new to airbrushing, that could be really scary because you don't know what the heck you're doing. This is quite good. It gives you two separate sheets. The first one is a little breakdown diagram and all the instructions in English and Japanese, which is rather brilliant, especially if you're not Japanese or don't read Japanese. Cross-sectional diagram to show you what everything is and what everything's called. You get instructions how to use a separate air can, instructions how to use both nozzles. Yes, this comes with two nozzles, and we'll go through that in a minute. Instructions how to actually use the airbrush, which is awesome. And also little bits and bobs how to strip it down and clean it. Now, interestingly for this brush, the instructions do suggest that for the majority of cases, you don't need to strip this down to clean it at all. Yeah, I've used airbrushes a lot and occasionally you will have to, so it does explain how to do it, but it kind of says for normal use, you don't need to do that. I'll probably still strip it down. The second sheet is all in Japanese, but it's the most useful of both the sheets. If you've got a mobile phone, and I suspect you have, and if you've got a smartphone, get yourself the Google Translate app if you don't read Japanese. It's very simple, go through and you can just translate all this. It's basically a troubleshooting guide for something isn't working, what do I do? And it's the usual adorable Japanese method of having a likeable character taking you through the steps. So for example, here he's saying nothing's happening, here he's saying I'm getting air but no paint, here he's saying I can't even pull the trigger back, and various other scenarios. It's basically, this is happening, my paint's all splatty. The answer is, there's probably paint blocking the nozzle, and then it gives you the steps how to fix that problem. So get the Google Translate app if you don't read or speak kanji or katakana. It takes you 2 minutes and you'll know exactly what the sheet is. Keep this because this is a very useful guide. So enough of the sheets, let's get the box. Okay, so here's what you get in the rather nice hard case. You get the airbrush itself. If you're using can-fed air, so you've not got a compressor but you're using cans of air, they rather nicely give you a hose and an adapter to do just that. This goes onto the end of the can. The little nozzle here is where the hose attaches, and then the other end goes to the base of the airbrush, so you can quite easily use that for canned air supplies. You get your traditional, if I can pick it up, nozzle spanner. Always get a nozzle spanner. That's if you want to strip the airbrush down, take the nozzle off, either replace the nozzle or get the needle out to clean it. You get two caps, and I'll explain that in a moment, two crown caps. And then you get the airbrush itself, like I said, which is a trigger grip. And last of all, you get a nice big 15mm paint cup. This is a 0.5mm nozzle, so it will go through the paint faster if I throw it across the desk, faster than a smaller nozzle brush. So yeah, the fact you get a 15mm pot on there and not like a 5 or 10mm, really handy. So let's have a closer look at the brush. Okay, so here is the brush itself. It's very nice looking. It's got a nice heft to it. Not so light that you'll be thinking it's some cheap thing off the internet, and not so heavy that it's going to get uncomfortable. Once the hose and the paint cup are on there, I can see myself having a nice solid grip on that. It has the trigger, And as with any trigger airbrush, more like a spray gun, you can push it back a little way for air, and then you'll feel the spring, and then you push back further for paint, and that's how you control your paint flow. I personally find triggers easier to use because I can keep my hand there and keep the paint flow constant, rather than a button on the top, which, because I have limited mobility in the top of my fingers, I get quite painful cramps and so on after about an hour of use. With these, I can go for hours and have no ill effects. You also get a little nut on the end which locks the trigger and locks how far back you can pull it. So if you want to apply a certain amount of paint consistently, you simply set this at the end. That restricts how far back the trigger can go. The further to the left you turn it, the more the trigger will pull back, and that is a good way of locking how much paint. You're not going to overpaint. You'll know I use the Iwata Neo trigger. That's a brilliant airbrush, but it doesn't have that, and that's one thing I do miss. But I do find it easier to control the paint flow by keeping it on the other one at a certain amount than trying to hold the trigger at the top in a certain position. So depends on your preference. If you prefer the button type, all the brushes in this range come as either button type or trigger type. You can choose whichever one's best for you. I just personally find triggers better. Now, it also has an adapter on the connector for the air hose. If you're using the spray cans by default, by air cans I mean, by default it comes with a smaller adapter. That's where the hose attaches from the air can. However, if you're using a compressor, you can just easily remove that, and there you go. That's your standard 1/8 inch connector for your air hose that will fit pretty much most air hoses to go to most compressors. Also that comes with this is the 15mm paint cup. This is a 0.5mm airbrush, like I said, so it's going to go through paint a lot faster than a 0.3 or a smaller one. So consequently you get a bigger air cup. And also, as I said, you get 2 nozzles. I'll take this one off and show you. Now, removing the nozzle is very easy. You simply unscrew this, remove that, and just gently pull the nozzle off. Be careful not to ding your needle when you put the airbrush down. I've done that enough times in my life. Yes. So it comes with 2 nozzles. You have a circular nozzle and you have a fan nozzle. Why do you get 2 nozzles? Well, this is a 0.5mm airbrush. So typically 0.5mm airbrushes are designed for wider, heavier coverage by default. So you get 2. The standard fan cap, which is the one that's on it when you get it, this is what gives you a very wide cone of paint. This is for your maximum coverage. It puts it out in an elliptical shape like that. And you can adjust it so it can either be a vertical ellipse, so it sprays it that way, or you can actually rotate this so it sprays it sideways, so you get a horizontal ellipse. Depending on how you want to do it, you can just adjust that. Rather than having to turn the piece that you're painting around or turn the airbrush around, you can just adjust that and do coats that go flat or coats that go vertical. That's a really handy little thing. So for the majority of times you're going to be using the fan cap because that's going to give you the widest coverage, things like primers and base coats. However, you do also get a circular nozzle, and this is for your finer close-up detail work. It gives a circular fan pattern, just a small circle of paint. And you can get as close as 1 millimeter with this to the thing you're painting for some super fine detail. And like I said, swapping them out is very, very easy. You just simply unscrew the middle connector. Now, if you're putting it back on again, always pull the needle back. First thing you should do, because you don't want to damage the needle. You simply slide the cap on, slide the connector ring back on, done. And if you want to adjust the end for the fan cap, all you do is simply loosen it, turn it round, and tighten it. There you go. You go from vertical to horizontal. So yes, 2. So you're going to have the option of very fine to medium, more medium, and you're going to have the option of wide coverage for things like primers and large-scale base coats. So enough waffle. Let's go and get this in the spray booth and have some fun with it and see what happens. Right, that's all the fun over. So, how did we do? Well, before we go any further, I need to explain something you will have seen in that last section. When I was using the wide fan cap, it looked like not much paint was coming out at all. And that is the case. However, it's not an issue with the airbrush that was causing that problem. There's two factors involved there. First and foremost, I was spraying primer on a kit that I'm actually working on. And I always spray primer in thin misty coats and build it up slowly to get the smoothest finish. I don't go and slap it all on in the interest of speed. So I would use thin coats anyway. However, there was another issue, and that again wasn't an issue with the brush, it was an issue with my little plucky compressor. Pika pika! Now if you follow me, you'll know I have a little plucky compressor that has no regulation at all. It's just on or off basically. I've had it for years. It was dirt cheap. I think it's getting to the end of its lifetime now. Basically, it's struggling to put out high enough pressure for some uses. Now, when you go through the instructions and the manuals that come with this airbrush, it does say in the manual that when you use the wide fan cap, you have to use more air, higher pressure. I think it says you have to use hard air, spray air hard. What it means is, when you use the round cap, it's just like any other airbrush. Your paint's coming through, and my compressor had no problem with that. It did some really nice smooth round dots. When you're using the wide fan cap, you're asking it to put through a lot more paint a lot faster to give a wider coverage area, and fast. Because it's putting through more, it needs a higher pressure to get that paint going through, and because my compressor is struggling and couldn't get that higher pressure, yeah, it didn't put a lot out. However, it still came out fine. I'll show you the piece I was priming. I'll just change the white balance so you can see it. Oh, whoa, everything's exploding. So you can see here, despite the issue I had with my compressor, it still came out really nice. It's a really smooth primer finish. It's got a bit touch-ups to do I've missed. So despite my compressor being a pain in the bum, this airbrush managed to give me still a nice smooth primer coat that's absolutely brilliant. And I'm really pleased with that. That's going to get painted now. So yes, it came out really nicely. And again, it was not the airbrush, it's my compressor that was causing the problem. So if you've got your own compressor, if you can regulate the pressure, if you use the wide fan cap, make sure you put the pressure up. If you have any issues with the amount of paint coming through, put your pressure up. I can't do that, so I couldn't show you that. So what are my impressions of this brush? Well, I really enjoyed using it. It's a really, really nice brush. It feels weighty when you hold it, but once it's in your hand, you've got the hose and the cup on, and there's paint in there, and you're using it in anger, it's very nicely balanced. It fits in the crook of your hand really quite nicely because of the long tail end. It's neither front nor back heavy. This end balances out that end quite nicely, especially even with paint in there. The trigger has a nice firmness to it. It's firm enough that you can hold it in a particular place without going all the way back. You can hold it halfway if that's what you want, but it's not so firm that you're fighting it to get any paint coming out. And the detent, where you push it a little bit for air and then a bit more for paint, is you can't get that wrong. It just stops. If you do a very light pull, it just stops, and that's so you don't get paint coming out. If you just want to, say, blow air on a piece, just do it very lightly. So it's really nicely balanced, very well weighted. The mechanism is divine. I really appreciated the fact that I could swap the cap on the fly. So when I've finished using the round one, instead of having to stop, empty the paint out, clean the brush, change nozzles, do this, do that. Well, some brushes, this you just unscrew that, pop the cap off, put the new cap on, screw it back on, done. I didn't even have to turn the compressor off. It took me all of 10 seconds. So that is a really nice touch. For painting wide areas of coverage, aside from my compressor problems, it gave me nice wide fan of paint both ways, and that will be great for priming large parts. I'm going to find that invaluable. The round cap did very, very nicely for coverage, a very round, compact, firm circle of paint. So for medium areas, painting, you know, individual panels and things like that, a quick blast through this would be absolutely fine. So I had a really good time with this brush. I can't really find particularly much of a fault with it. I currently have a 0.5 and a 0.35mm brush. My 0.5 is a bit ropey, so I'm looking at getting a 0.5 anyway, replacement. So I might, you know, I'm strongly thinking about getting one of these myself. Sadly, I have to send this back. Oh well, never mind. So yes, overall impressions, I like this brush a lot. It's very nice. The big cup is great because if you're going to be priming, you're going to have a lot of areas. It didn't struggle at all with the thick primer. I didn't even thin the primer, it was just straight through the brush. My 0.35 Neo struggles a little bit and gives me a slightly rough texture. This had no problem at all with the primer going through it. Despite my compressor issues, it gave me a nice smooth finish in the primer on that part I was painting. So for priming in large areas, absolutely, I think I might get myself one of these puppies. I really enjoyed it. So on to the final part now, which is the bit you've all been waiting for, the important part. Should you buy this? Should you get one of these? Let's go through that. Okay, well, the thing to look at when you're looking at buying an airbrush is what you're going to use it for. Now, the thing to bear in mind is this brush is a 0.5mm. In the Procon range, they also have every size from 0.18mm, I think. Is it 0.18? 0.18 to this 5mm nozzle and everything in between. So, depending on what you want to use, this may not necessarily be the specific brush for you, but there is a Procon brush that will suit your needs. If you make very, very small models, like, you know, high grades, real grades, and there's not a lot of priming and coverage to do, if you're not worried about having 1,000 parts that are all, you know, a foot squared, then, you know, the smaller size, the 0.3, perhaps might be better for you. If you make bigger models, so say large perfect grades, you do even things like ships, small scale planes, like 1/24 scale, things like that, then this will be fine. Because it's not just a big spray and pray wide angle 0.5mm brush, because it's got the round cap, you've got the option of using it for your smaller painting areas, like painting panels and smaller parts as well. It's not going to be as fine and delicate as, say, a 0.3 or even the 0.18, but that depends what you want to use it for. As a good all-rounder, assuming you're not going to want any fine crisp details, this is brilliant. So for weathering like streaks and things, yeah, this is going to be a bit of overkill. You're just going to paint the whole piece whatever colour you're trying to paint. For more global painting, base coats, primers, or large parts, any kind of, you know, painting on large parts, consider the 0.5, if not the 0.3. One place to think about a 0.5 over a 0.3 is the kind of paint you're going to be painting. With any 0.3 airbrush, you may find some paint struggle to go through, like, for example, thick primers, or paints that are thick and have metal flakes, like some of the Tamiya metallic, like chrome, silver and gunmetal. They're very thick, they have metal flakes, and they will clog up easily on a smaller bore airbrush, so like a 0.3. My Neo, I can't spray gunmetal and things like that through my Neo, I have to use my 0.5. So yeah, if you're going to be spraying thick paints like metallics, not alclads and things, but things like acrylic metallics, then the 0.5 is going to be a better bet, because that's going to struggle less with the paint, probably not struggle at all, and also make cleaning out easier. If you've already got a smaller bore airbrush, say a 0.3 or a 0.25 or a 0.18, then consider one of these as a complementary brush. It never harms to have more than one airbrush in your toolkit, especially if you're finding that the brush you've got is a smaller scale, smaller bore brush, and you're struggling with, for example, thick paints, or you really hate spending 3 hours priming on every kit you make. A larger brush will help you get through that faster, and it may also cope with those thicker paints. So even if you've got an airbrush already on a smaller scale, consider getting a 0.5. But like I say, if the 0.5 is, if you're doing lots of tiny fine work, or you're not going to be using very thick paints, then maybe you don't want this particular one, but the 0.3 might be a better option. But either way, if this one is anything to go by, these Procon brushes are something I can actually recommend. They are new to the UK. They've been out for a while and you can get them imported, but they're new to the UK. They're now available in the UK over the last few months. So if you're looking for an airbrush, yeah, check one of these out. You no longer have to pay import fees and duties and things like that, and pay a fortune to get it from Japan. My good friends at japancool.co.uk, link here, are supplying these of all the sizes. So if you're looking at getting your first airbrush, or you're looking at getting another airbrush to go with the one you've got, either bigger scale or smaller scale, hit the guys up at Japan Cool and they'll sort you out with one of these. I can recommend this. If this was a terrible brush, I'd say no. It is important for me, in the aid of transparency, to explain that I haven't been paid for this review, nor am I keeping this airbrush. I kind of wish I was. I'm merely making this video, been sent this to review, so this is an impartial review. I'm not on anybody's payroll. This is my genuine thoughts about this brush. You're not going to go wrong if you get yourself one of these. Thank you so much for watching. As always, take care of yourselves. Go along to my Facebook page, facebook.com/modelmakingGuru. give me your thoughts on this, or comment on the video below if you've got some thoughts on this. Make sure to take a look at my Patreon page. Consider supporting me on Patreon so I can continue to bring you things like these reviews and other videos. And again, thank you so much for watching. Go and make some cool things, and adios amoebas.